So here's the question. Do you film a sit-down vlog when you're so hungry you feel like you might fall over? Or do you film a vlog post-lunch when you want to take a nap? Think about it and get back to me. So here's what we're doing today. I didn't have anything on the dock for today because the vlog that I am doing is taking much longer than I thought it would. So I had to do a video and I was like, well, I've had this idea for a while, and it's been about 6 months since I did these are my favorite horror books so far. So I thought I'd tackle another genre. So we're doing thrillers. Thrillers aren't actually one of my favorite genres to read, but when they hit, they really hit. And I haven't read as many as I have mystery, fantasy, romance, other genres, but I have read enough for a list. So we're going to talk about my top 10 favorite thrillers so far, with an honorable mention because I forgot about it after I made my list and I didn't want to kick any of the others off. So we're cheating. This is actually 11 books. So you're just going to deal. Okay, so let's talk about my honorable mention first. And the reason this one is the honorable mention, even though I think I might like it more than some of the others on the list, is that recency bias. I didn't want to say for sure because it hasn't had a lot of time to sit because I just read it last month, I think. What we're going to do is I'm going to read the first sentence and then I'm going to show you what the book is. Some of you might already know what the book is after I read the first sentence. A podcaster has decided to ruin my life, so I'm buying a chicken. And that's Listen for the Lie by Annie Tintera. So this is my honorable mention. I really just liked the tone of this. I liked how funny it was. I liked all the characters. I didn't really read it for the twists. And this also has a heavy mystery element as well as a thriller element. So it's not even like a pure thriller like most of these are. But I just really enjoyed it, and I'm taking every opportunity that I can to plug it at the moment so that more people read it because I think it's fun. Listen for the Lie. It's a podcast book. Half of it is podcasts with this podcaster who did solve a crime, and he's doing a new season, and he's taking on this case of our main character Lucy, who 5 years before was found wandering the road with no memory, and her best friend, what's her name? Savvy, was found dead down the road. And when no other suspects appear, her entire town turns on her and decides that she's the one that killed her. And Lucy doesn't know any different. She thinks she might have killed her too. She has no memory, so she doesn't know. So it was a really fun read. I liked it a lot, but I couldn't officially kick any of the others off the list. So this is just an honorable mention, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. So now, me and thrillers, I don't really care about twists. I don't like domestic thrillers, really, and I don't care for dark thrillers. So my thriller taste is very picky. So a lot of these are like meta, or they are so well written that you can't deny it. I think you'll see what I mean, that this isn't going to look like most people's favorite thrillers lists, because this isn't my favorite genre. So Ashley, why are you doing this list? Because I wanted to, okay? Because it seemed easier than narrowing down all of the hundreds of thousands of fantasy books I've read, or the hundreds and hundreds of romance books, or even all the mystery books I read. This was the easiest one to put together in a morning. Let's just say that. So now let's talk number 10. First sentence. It was Jenny's death that killed my mother. And we're looking at The Night Swim by Megan Golden. Now, this book, in terms of the mystery and the twists and stuff, it doesn't really stand out in my memory, and this is one reason why it's at 10 instead of higher up the list, because the actual mystery and the thriller plot wasn't the best. What I took away from this book was its focus on rape culture, because this is a book about another podcaster. I like podcasts. Rachel Crall. This is a series. There's another book now that was just published last year, if you want to check it out. But she's in her second season of her very successful podcast, where she actually cleared the name of somebody who had been accused of a crime and found that they didn't do it. So now she's doing her second, or maybe it's her third season. I can't remember for sure. It's been a while since I've read the book. And she's in this beachfront town to follow a rape trial of a local Golden Boy sports hero. She's obviously very pro-victim and anti-rape culture. So that's an interesting aspect to follow. But while she's there, somebody keeps leaving her notes and messages about a missing girl, and they're convinced that she can help them. and they kind of stalk her a little bit, and then the two things become intertwined. So I just had a really good time with this in terms of like the subject matter, which is why I've picked it at number 10. But again, if you're looking for like super twisty, edge of your seat thrill rides, this isn't that. This is more of like a considered slower paced thriller, but it's still a good time that will also make you mad when you think about rape cultures. I thought it treated the subject matter very well. Okay, so number 9. This one I'm having regrets about. I should have made it number 10, but let's see how things go. First sentence. Jacob Finch Bonner, the once promising author of New and Noteworthy, the New York Times Book Review novel, The Invention of Wonder, let himself into the office he'd been assigned on the second floor of Richard Peng Hall, set his beat-up leather satchel on the barren desk, and looked around in something akin to despair. This is the plot by Jean Hanff Korelitz. Now, this one I sort of waffled putting it on this list because it was one of those books that just nearly made it to like perfect novel status for me, but it didn't quite live up to its premise, which is this guy who is a once promising novelist who got a lot of critical acclaim for one of his novels and then has done nothing since. He's basically unfulfilled and he can't write anymore. He's blocked, and he's basically reduced at this point to teaching writing workshops at like a really low rent college, not even like a prestigious college. And one of his students that he has in his workshop is named Evan, and he's convinced he's not even sure why he's there other than to get the degree, because he thinks that he's got this plot. And you know, the play on words is another reason I like this, because there's like a triple quadruple meaning of the title. He's got this plot that he thinks will make it impossible for him not to have a best-selling book. So he's pretty arrogant. One day he just tells the professor the plot. The professor knows he can't use it because he thinks he's right. He thinks it's a great plot. And then one day he finds out this student has died, and he's sunk even lower. He's not even working in his chosen field anymore. He's running a hotel. It's a hotel for writers, but he's still a hotel, and he's not teaching. He's not doing anything. So he's like, he died, and then he waits. Like, is this plot going to be used? Like, who's going to use this plot? Did he finish it? And nothing happens. So he's like, well, what if I took the plot? I mean, it's not even plagiarism, right? It's just an idea. People have ideas all the time. So he writes the book, and then it fast forwards a little bit later, and sure enough, he's a best-selling author, huge acclaim. They're making a movie. Everybody loves him. And then he starts getting these messages saying, basically, I know what you did. And the rest of the book is him trying to figure out who is threatening him, and then also diving into the history of this kid, Evan, and where he came from and where he got this plot, because clearly he got it from somewhere that maybe he shouldn't have got it from. I really liked this book a lot. It was such a great time. I really liked the way it talked about writing, which is probably why I have it on this list, because it has stuck with me in that way. I found it pretty meaningful, and it actually made me want to start writing again. I love when I can get inspiration from other books, and like some books make you feel bad, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, I can never write like this. But then some books just fire up your creative juices, and this was one of those. The only bad thing about this one, which is why it's not higher up the list, is that I don't think the actual plot that is central to the book was that mind-blowing. Maybe if this would have been published 10 years before it was actually published, it would have been more mind-blowing. But since the thriller boom has been happening, it takes a lot to shock people. And for a plot to really stand out and be like, oh my God, yes, holy shit. And I just don't quite think that it reached that. So, but I still thought this was a really good read. And they actually just announced that a sequel is coming out called The Sequel. And I'm a little nervous because I think this author, though, she only really writes when she has a story in mind. So I think we can trust her to have it not just be a cash grab and not have it be diminishing returns. But we'll see. So now so that was 9. So this is 8. Now this one, the first line is a bit iffy because there's a bunch of different sections, but I'm going to go with the first line of the foreword, which is actually not a foreword. You'll understand what I mean in a second. So you've decided to commit a murder, and that's Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes. So this book, I have classified it as a thriller, even though it kind of feels like it has mystery vibes. It's not a mystery. There's no mystery to solve in here, really. The people who are getting murdered we know they're gonna get murdered, and it's watching our three main characters figure out their murders and try to pull them off. That is the draw. And it's got more of a thriller aspect to it, although it's not, I mean, it's got some twists and turns, but it's so kind of uncategorizable. But I just had to throw it in here anyway, because like, where else am I going to put it? I can't put it in mystery, can't put it in fiction. It is historical fiction, but like, who would count this as historical fiction? So fun fact, this is by Rupert Holmes, who wrote the Pina Colada Song. And this is set in the 1950s at a school, the McMaster's, let me get it. The McMaster's Conservatory, which is a school to teach people how to commit the perfect murder. And it's like murder as an art form and murder as a moral good. So they basically will not allow people into this school and teach them how to commit their perfect murder unless there's rules for like the murders they're allowed to commit. Like basically the one that I remember the most is you have to be able to prove that the world would be a better place without this person in it. We follow 3 different characters as they try to pull off the perfect murder. And we also get to see them learn how to do that and interact at the school, McMaster's Conservatory. And it was just a really fun time. Like, I had such a fun time. This nearly made my best books of the year list, but it got bumped off by Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, which I did end up giving 5 stars. This was only 4.5. But I had such a fun time with it. And I feel like if I read it again, it's going to hold up. Because the thing with thrillers and why it's not my favorite genre is that a lot of them, once you know the twists and once you know what happens, they don't hold up, because the whole fun of them was, oh, what's going to happen? And then once you know, like, everything else falls flat. So all of these that I have chosen are books where that's not the case. Like, even if you predict them, or even if the twists weren't there, there's other stuff going on in the books that makes it so that they hold up and that they're worth reading again and again. So this is Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes. I highly recommend this. If you liked Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone and you're looking for like a similar meta vibe, I recommend this, even though it's not a mystery. Okay, so just want to show you guys this. I put these books in a stack this morning and I've already forgotten that I did this, but I'm glad that I did, because whenever I'm doing these videos that are like lists, I found that I forget books that are not right here in my stack, and I have one book that I don't own yet. I should buy it because I love it, but I don't own it yet. So as a placeholder, I just stuck a silly book to make myself laugh, to remind myself to talk about this other book, and that's Ice Planet Barbarians. I haven't read this book yet, but you couldn't go for a more different vibe if you were trying. So let's pull up the first sentence of the book we're going to be talking about. I should have been prepared for this. Once you finish your milk, please put the carton back in the box. Now, those of you who have read this book, you know exactly what the book is, because milk is a very important plot point, and that's Confessions by Kane Minato. So this book is actually a Japanese thriller. It was translated. I forgot to look up the translator just now, but I'll put their name right here. So this is a really, really up thriller, and I want to read more from this author. And actually, this book is one of the reasons I've been exploring Japanese crime over the past couple of years, because I actually picked this book up because Read Harder one year. I needed a book to fulfill some prompt, but I don't remember any longer what the prompt is. I'm sure it's on my Goodreads, but I don't want to pull it up. And I was blown away by this book, and I was like, what's going on over there in Japan? Because there's really nothing like this here. It just has a whole other flavor. I was so entertained. So here's what's going on. So I can't spoil too many things, but the book is split into, is it 3 or 4 sections? I can't remember. I think it's 3. But the first section of the book, as you'll just heard about, Put Your Milk Cartons Away, follows an 8th grade teacher in Japan, and it's her last day. She is leaving the school and she's leaving her class. And we find out, first chapter is her talking to her students at the end of the school day, and she's sort of leaving them with a parting shot. And that parting shot is her telling them about basically why she's leaving and what she's done. So the background here is that she had a 3 or 4-year-old daughter, and her daughter was murdered by one of the students. As far as I'm aware, the murder was unsolved, but she's pretty sure she knows who did it. The great thing about this first chapter and it's the best part of the book, is this first chapter, is she just kind of meanders and you think she doesn't really have a point and she doesn't really know where she's going because she starts telling these random like anecdotes, and then as her little speech goes on, she starts pulling them in and the tone of what she's saying changes, and you can visibly feel the tension in the classroom, even though the book is giving no indication of what's happening in the classroom, but it's like you're one of the students sitting there listening to her, and it's so tense, and the things that she starts saying are so wild. I actually put this book down at the end of this first chapter or this first section. I said, what the fuck did I just read? Then I had to keep going. And then parts 2 and 3 follow along with the consequences of the murder of this daughter and the students that are involved. And those parts were good too, but I just hold up, like that first section is 5 stars. I gave the book 4 stars, but the reason it's on one of my favorite thrillers is because that first section is perfect. I still think about it like quite frequently when things like milk or other things that happen in the book come up, and I'm like, oh God, confessions. So highly recommend that one. That is my number 7. Yeah, that's my number 7. Okay, number 6, The End. This is the first sentence. And that's The Last Word by Taylor Adams. So this one I read last year, and I just had so much fun with it. Like, it's not groundbreaking. It's not like hard hitting. It doesn't have any tough subject matter. It's just a fun frickin' time. Actually, I take it back. It does have some tough subject matter once you realize why the main character has isolated herself in this house, but that's not really apparent until like the last third of the book, maybe even the last quarter of the book. Until then, it's just like a popcorn thriller. So basically, if you haven't heard of it, the premise of this book is that the main character, Emma, is staying at this house kind of in the middle of nowhere. She's house sitting, or is she doing an Airbnb? I think she's doing an Airbnb house sitting combo. I'm not positive. And she has her dog with her, and that's it. And all she does, basically, it's very obvious from the beginning, she's kind of depressed and something has happened to her, but we have no idea what. All she does is read crappy books on Kindle. The book opens as she finishes a particularly heinous horror novel. She meanders over to Amazon and leaves a 1-star review. What happens very soon after she leaves this review is that the author emails her. And at first he's kind of polite, I say, because it's audacious as hell anytime an author emails a reviewer and asks them to take their review down because it's hurting their little fifis, which is what happened. But then he just keeps going further and he keeps taking it further. And it's pretty clear that he's a disturbed person. And then over the next couple of days, she sees somebody is outside of her house, and like just it goes from there. Okay, and she's all alone. All she has is her dog and her neighbor that lives across the way, but she has to look at him with a telescope kind of thing, and she doesn't really know him. I think I read this in one sitting. Maybe I had to stop to go to work, and then when I got home from work I read the whole thing. I can't really remember. I think I read it during Summerween. Very vivid memories of this book, and after I finished it I was like, I'm super excited to read No Exit, which I also have. Maybe that one will be even better than this one. But yeah, and the fact that the meta elements of an author writing about a reviewer being stalked by an author and like having that sort of like self-reflection capability was just a really fun time. So yeah, The Last Word by Taylor Adams. Now we hit number 5. Some of you might be surprised about what's here for a couple reasons. First of all, because it's considered a stone cold classic by pretty much everyone. And second of all, because if you look at my Goodreads, it's got a 3-star review. We'll talk about it in a second. So here's the first sentence. When I think of my wife, I always think of her head. And that's Gone Girl. This is, I think, the book that started it all. I do not remember seeing many thrillers as we know them today in the market before this book. And I'm pretty sure this kicked it all off. And it's still the king. No one has quite reached the heights of the domestic thriller since Gillian Flynn with Gone Girl. And I don't read domestic thrillers pretty much ever unless something else is pulling me in. Like, I recently read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which is technically a domestic thriller, but also the focus isn't on her marriage or her family life, even though that stuff is there. It's on something else, so that's why I wanted to read it. But anyway, this book, I read it when it first came out. I read it from the library. I recently just bought this off of some used bookstore website, and it's actually a first edition. So who knew that I would get that? I paid $5 for it. So that's a steal. I remember being really engrossed in this, but at the time I read this, which would have been, and I could look at my Goodreads, but it's easier to just look at the publication date. Okay, so this was 2012. So I would have read this in 2012 because everyone was talking about it and I would have wanted, just like I do now. When something gets really buzzy, I get so curious and I'm like, I want in on this party. I want to know what's going on. I'm too curious for my own good. I now have a Goodreads shelf, by the way, called Curiosity Killed the Cat, which is basically for when that happens to me and then the book is a bust. But anyway, this book was too much for me in 2012. So that was 12 years ago. So I would have been, how old am I now? I just had a birthday. I always have to stop and think about it. So I was 27. I was 27 when I read this, and I was still like, I don't know. I'm a weird person. You can't really categorize my ages and taste, but at the time I was not into dark stuff at all. I didn't like books that portrayed humanity as being unsavory and like dirty, and you know what I mean? I still don't like that really, but I make exceptions now for particularly witty or incisive or well-written things because they're fun. And this is a fun book, and I feel like if I reread it now, I would give it 5 stars. There are parts of the book that are like burned into my memory, and not just the plot, but like the writing itself. Like everybody knows the cool girl passage. Like that's just genius. The other thing is I watched the David Fincher movie when it first came out, and I love that movie. And if I love that movie so much, then I mean, I feel like it's just one of those things where I was just not ready for this book, if that makes sense. This is my number 5, is Gone Girl. So I feel like any thriller list without this on there had better have a damn good reason for it not being on there. Otherwise your like whole list is invalidated by everyone watching. So it's here, guys. I've got it on here. Gillian Flynn, Gone Girl. I really kind of want to reread this sometime this year because I do want to give it, and I want to confirm that this would be a 5-star now and not a 3-star. If you look up my Goodreads review from back then, it's really dramatic. It's kind of funny. So maybe I'll pop it up here. Now this book, so now we're in my top 4. We're in my top 4. So these are all 5 stars. Up until now, we've had 4.5s and 4s and a 3. So you can see this really isn't, like my horror video, when I did that, they were all 5-star books. And I know when I do a romance and when I do mystery and when I do fantasy and etc., I'm going to have so many 5-star books to choose from. It's going to be almost impossible. But with this genre, I did have to put in under 5 stars. So this is where the 5 stars start. Now you might already know what this is because it's unique looking, but maybe not. I don't know. So this is a 3rd book in a series. I read it a couple of years ago and I was completely blown away by it. This 3rd book, though, is very different from the first 2, which are pure mysteries. And this 2nd book has mystery elements. It has a mystery plot, but mostly it's a balls to the wall thriller. And it, especially considering it's young adult, goes very dark. And a lot of people are very angry at this book on Goodreads. It's kind of funny, like they're like betrayal, but I never felt that way. I haven't rated it on Goodreads. I think now, again, it's going to be a 5 when I reread it because I think about it a lot and I just think about it positively and I'm like, wow, I can't believe she did that and she pulled it off. Let's read the first sentence. Okay, the first sentence is, dead-eyed, that's what they said, wasn't it? Lifeless, glassy, empty. This is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, book 3 in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So like I said, this is book 3, and it's pretty rare that books get better in a series as they go, but this series for me did. I love book 1, but they get progressively more complex as they go because it's not only dealing with like different plots, but it's also the consequences of previous books build up on the main character Pippa, and she's having to deal with not only with what's going on in the current book, but what happened previously, both in terms of like actual consequences that are physically happening to her in real life and emotional consequences in terms of trauma and the way her life has changed because of the podcasts that she put together. So I'm not going to talk about this book because it's number 3 and the plots go together. But in terms of the first book, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, it features Pippa Fitz-Amobi, It's in her, I believe it's her junior year of high school. Now, I read the American version, and they actually Americanized everything, or they tried to Americanize everything, and they failed spectacularly, by the way. This is the British version. So when I reread, I'm excited to not have to deal with the weird Americanization that they did. Like, I don't understand why they couldn't just take the book exactly as it was and publish it in America without all the weird Americanisms. Like, it takes place in England. Teenagers are not idiots. I'm not an idiot. I'm capable of reading a book set in another country, okay? Anyway, but all that to say is that I'm not quite sure of the exact, like, how much they changed. But in the first book, the American version, she's a junior in high school, and she is getting ready. She's taking a class, or maybe she's a senior. I need to reread this series. She's doing, as her project for a class, she decides to investigate a murder that happened to a girl that was solved, but she thinks the wrong person was blamed and prosecuted. And that's her friend Ravi's older brother. And she approaches Ravi and says, hey, I'm going to try and find out who really killed, what's her name? I don't remember her name. So-and-so, who was Ravi's brother's girlfriend at the time. So of course they blamed the boyfriend. And she treats it like a project. And then what appeals to me so much about that first book in particular is that Pippa is a nerd. She's like classic overachiever. Everything in that book is meticulously documented. We read it from the perspective of her transcripts from interviews. We've got her notes. We've got all of the text messages, and then she goes in and she actually analyzes everything. So it's very satisfying in terms of mystery element. Now, that's the basis for it. This is book 3, after she's already solved that crime in book 1, and then a different crime plus consequences in book 2. And then consequences tripled in this book. And like I said, this turns into a thriller. So I can't tell you what happens. If you're really curious and you don't want to read the book, you can go spoil yourself. But I highly recommend reading it, even if you don't normally like YA. Everything I like about mystery and thrillers was in this series, and it did not matter to me at all that it was young adult because she held nothing back. Like, there was no lack of adult subject matter in these books. I mean, the only difference is that they were younger characters at different stages in their lives. And it was so beautifully plausible, everything that happens, because she is still young and the author doesn't ignore that. Anyway, I could go on and on about this series, so I will stop, but I'm pretty sure this is a 5-star book. And I've read it, so I just need to reread it and confirm. But yeah, this is my number 4, As Good as Dead. Now we have my top 3. So let's go. First sentence of this book. Hello there, she said. Succinct. That's the Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. So this book is just one of those thrillers that is like pure thriller. This is like the platonic thriller. If you want twists, if you want good character development, if you want a story that isn't predictable in where it's going, if you want something that takes something old and makes it into something new. So this is a play on Strangers on a Train, which is the Patricia Highsmith novel and the movie made about it afterwards. And okay, Lily, I know she's mad. I'm sitting in a way that she can't climb onto my lap and it's upsetting her. That movie is about 2 strangers who meet on a train who get to talking and decide that they can commit murder for each other. Or like, wouldn't it be it's a little misleading because one of the characters has this idea and they sort of play it off as a joke. And the other one is very serious about it and sort of takes it upon himself to like do the thing. So then the other person sort of has to reciprocate or else, they're going to get caught. But in this one, the 2 characters who meet are Ted Severson and Lily Kintner. They are in an airport. I believe it's in England. I can't remember for sure though, but they meet at an airport bar and they get to talking. Ted is very upset because he's recently found out that his wife is cheating on him and he loved her so much and she's betrayed him and he just wants to kill her. And he's sort of half joking when he says that to Lily. And then Lily says, well, what if I helped you? I mean, they're on the plane at this point, by the way. They're not still in the bar. They meet on the bar and then they're together on the plane. So they come up with this plan for Lily to help him kill his wife because they're strangers. So what motive would this stranger have to kill This woman, Miranda is her name. It goes from there. This book had so many wild twists and turns, most of which I didn't see coming, but the twists were not just there for shock. They were there for definite story purpose. So they're like the perfect twist. And also the way that those twists change the story as it goes. It's not just like throwing a twist out there and then going along. Those twists change the shape of the story and the direction of the story every time they happen. I did the audio, by the way. The audiobook is fantastic. I loved all of the narrators, but particularly if you're a fan of Angel, the television show, one of the narrators of the detective who gets involved in the case once things start happening. Oh gosh, what's Keith Sarabajka. I think his name is, that's how I've always said it. I think it might be Sarabajka or something like that. I don't remember. It's a difficult last name, okay? But he's got this beautiful gravelly voice and he's just very good. Definitely recommend the audiobook for this. But yeah, if you want just like a pure thriller, like that is just incredibly well done, you can look no farther than The Kind Worth Killing. Now we're to my top 2. This one is a little bit of a different thing. It's not a domestic thriller. It's not a murder mystery. There's no mystery of any kind. Ike tried to remember a time when men with badges coming to his door early in the morning brought anything other than heartache and misery. But try as he might, nothing came to mind. And that is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. So this book is one of the most intense reading experiences I've ever had, and not just because it's nonstop from beginning to end, but because the way that it gets inside of your emotions, these 2 main characters and what they're dealing with and what they're doing in response. It's basically, I mean, I know there are people who don't like this. I don't understand those people, but I know they exist. I found this so impossible to look away from, and I was so emotionally involved. I wanted them to get their revenge. So basically there's these 2 characters, Ike and Buddy Lee. They're both ex-convicts, and they both have gay sons that they have not great relationships with because they're both pretty homophobic, and their sons are married to each other, and they have a 3-year-old daughter. As the story starts, which we just heard the first sentence, Ike is getting the news that their sons have been murdered in a hate crime, basically. Ike and Buddy Lee get together, even though they don't really like each other, and decide to make the killers of their sons pay. Because not only are they dealing with the grief of losing their children, but they're also dealing with the knowledge that they were bad fathers. And now they can't ever fix it. They can't ever make it right. They can't ever tell their sons they love them or accept them or heal their relationship. It's done. It's over. So the only way they know how to make it better is to enact the most bloody revenge possible on these men that killed their sons. And it was gory, it was violent, it was emotional as these men like deal with their prejudices. Like, some people think it was a little heavy-handed, but I'm like, if this was really happening in real life, like, you bet your ass it would be heavy-handed. There's like real men who have real problems with homophobia because they're so toxic and they've been raised in this culture that really does not value homosexuality in any way. I mean, it just felt really real to me. Like, this is S.A. Cosby writes books set in the South, and so it's very much set in that place and time. I met him. He was so cool. He was such a good speaker a couple of years ago at the Tucson Festival of Books. He signed my book. You probably can't read that. It says, "No tears, just smiles." I'm like, dude, that's not the vibe here. That's not the vibe you were going for. And the reason I ended up giving this 5 stars was the ending. This has one of the best last sentences of a book that I've ever read. Like, when you get a perfect last sentence, there is no better feeling, because it not only is just good in itself, but it somehow finds a way to reach back to the beginning of the story and then make it into a whole. The last sentence of this book does that. So yeah, Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby is my number 2. And my number 1, read this one during the pandemic, like in 2021, I think. And I immediately went and bought a copy because I had gotten it from the library because I needed to have it forever and ever. First sentence: "I'll know it's working when he starts to scream." And that's They Never Learn by Lainey Fargo. Is it Lane or Laney? I had a friend in high school whose name was spelled like this, and it was Laney. I think I've heard other people say Lane though, so I guess I'll go with that. This book is everything to me. I love it so much. It's technically a dark academia, but it doesn't read like one to me. it's definitely a good for her book, and I love good for her books. The premise here is we have a college professor named Scarlett, and she has desires and urges, and the way that she satisfies those urges is by picking one vile specimen of manhood per year, per school year, who has done terrible things and is not being punished for it. He's going to get away with things. And so she takes it upon herself to kill him. And as the book opens, she has chosen a target. He's a rapist, and he's a frat boy, and he's living his best life. And she kills him. That's the first chapter. But from there, once we start to learn why she does what she does and who she is, we also learn that the body count, because she's been at this school for years, has been stacking up, and like one per year for however many years, it's getting suspicious. So even though she tries to make them look like accidents, or she doesn't have like she doesn't stab them and then leave their bodies around. Like she's smart about it. But even so, the numbers are starting to add up. And there's now an official investigation into finding the killer at this school who is targeting these poor boys. Because of course she can't say why she's killed them, so nobody knows that they've done these terrible things. Well, not nobody, but the general public doesn't know. What she does is she decides to insinuate herself into the investigation so she knows what's going on. And the lead investigator's name is Mina, and they're immediately drawn to each other. And this is sapphic, so. And then the other part of the story is there's a freshman named Carly, and she is dealing with college for the first time, and she comes from a not great home situation, so she's kind of all up in the air anyway, and then her roommate is assaulted. And then that's a secondary plot. Now, there was some stuff in here that was so cleverly disguised that I just did not see the reveals coming. And I normally see that there's several kinds of reveals in here that I always see coming because they're really hard to disguise, especially if you've read enough thrillers. I didn't see them coming. She disguised them so well. But the thing that I love about this book was just the clarifying rage of this character and the catharsis of doing what she does and then getting away with it. And then what happens at the end. I don't want to spoil it, but like the end of this book, I was just like cheering. Yeah, this is my favorite thriller, They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. Highly recommend, even if you don't normally like thrillers. If you like good for her books where I support women's wrongs kind of thing, this is a book for you. So yeah, that's my top 10 favorite thrillers so far. And I have to bring in a special guest. Okay, we'll play in a second. Okay. All right. So I had to bring Pippin in for the video because today, April 20th, it's Pippin's birthday. He's 1 year old. Say hi. I had to get him out from under the bed by shaking the laser pointer, and now he's looking for the dot. He's very smart. When I've had cats before play with laser pointers, they stop looking as soon as it disappears, but he will sit there for 10 minutes after the laser pointer has gone away, and he will keep looking for it. So he's very smart. Huh. Say, everybody, I'm 1 year old. I'm almost grown up. I almost bought him, hey, so, he's all like, give me my stuff. I almost bought him a party hat and like a bow tie, but then I figured that would just make him sad. I don't think he likes clothes. He's not a clothes kitty. So, Pippin, say hi to everyone. Say hi. Yeah, he's very soft and heavy and very large. He's very large. So that's this video. We're at 48 minutes. Hopefully I can get it down a little. I hope you had a good time watching my thriller opinions, even though that's not my favorite genre. If thrillers are your favorite genre, let me know. Let me know what your favorite thrillers are down below if I'm missing anything in particular, knowing that thrillers aren't my favorite. So like, I really want standout thriller recommendations, you know what I mean? I would love that. I always like a standout thriller. And then if you have made it this far, please leave me a kitty cat emoji or a knife or both. And if you like the video, please leave me a like and subscribe if you wanna. And I will see you guys soon. Say bye. Bye. Okay, love you, bye.